Hello everyone and welcome to another lockdown interview. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Dan Bigham, who rides for Ribble Pro Cycling on the road and Team Huub Wattbike on the track. Dan Bigham made headlines in 2017 when he took 10 national time trial titles in the UK, and he was also the driving force behind the underdog story of Team KGF, who went on to become national pursuit champions in front of the GB squad, and they won their first World Cup win in Minsk in Belarus as well. Dan has a fascinating story as he has a background in motorsport engineering, and this led him to starting the Wattshop and has led him to become an aerodynamic expert in the field of cycling. He's been working with the Danish team Pursuit Squad, who broke the world record in Berlin this year. Riding for Ribble Pro Cycling, Dan did his first tour of Yorkshire in 2019 and came very close to taking the win on the first stage. And later that year, he was also part of the GB team time trial relay squad that won bronze at the World Championships in Yorkshire. Certainly a very interesting career in the world of cycling. So without further ado, here's the interview with Dan Bigham. Hi Dan, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Yourself?
Good. Whereabouts are you and how is this lockdown? Because you are in the UK, so how's that kind of been affecting you?
I'm currently in Staffordshire in the Midlands. Yeah, I've been, to be honest, actually finding lockdown quite productive. I don't know if it's been the same with everybody else. I've seen plenty of mad long rides and Everesting and everything else all over Strava, but myself, I've taken it as an opportunity to get stuck in on tyre testing and drivetrain testing and all the work that I never get a chance to do because I'm all over the shop. And yeah, the government tells you you've got to stay in your house for a few months, so crack on with everything I can do there.
So you ride for Ribble Pro Cycling, which is a continental team, but you also have Wattshop. So how do you kind of balance those kind of things, and like what exactly does the Wattshop do? I know you sell like so many like niche improvement products for time trials, but like what's a day to day with that, and how do you balance it with your
My
pro
riding.
touring?
Yeah, so I guess on the road and the track, I'm lucky that obviously at least until last year, the seasons were in alternate parts of the year. So on the road, I ride for Ribble well tight, and then on the track for Huub Wattbike. And then from a work perspective, there's kind of a couple aspects to what I do. There's Wattshop, and that's I guess what most people know me for, which basically is exactly what you said. We design custom componentry, bespoke componentry, whether it's extensions, cranksets, loads of niche little components that just help people go fast. We do aerodynamic testing on the track, in the wind tunnel, out in the real world as well. It's basically like an e-commerce store and a consultancy rolled into one. And then sort of by extension of all the Wattshop stuff, I have two roles, or even two and a bit out in the real world. So I also work for the Danish Federation with a couple of the really good guys there.
Thank you.
And I work they're awesome. I absolutely love that part. It's my favorite bit of the job. But well, to be honest, I know the other part is Canyon SRAM, and I love that as well because they're both really progressive, and there's a lot to be said for that. A team that just buys into things for the right reasons and just wants to go faster, and they aren't stuck in the old way of doing things. Like you just go in with a mad idea, and they're all keen for it, which is great. But yeah, balancing it not so easy, but you just have to do what you have to do, and it means cramming training sessions in, probably a lot more intensity than most people at my level do, and a lot less volume, but it works for me, so I'm a bit lucky.
So your background's actually quite fascinating. You did a motorsport engineering degree at Brookes University in Oxford. How did that kind of, you're like seen as the aerodynamics guy right now in cycling. So how did that kind of help you? And you also did a placement year with a quite famous Formula One team.
Yeah, so I studied both undergrad and masters at Brookes. And to be honest, it was such a good place. Originally, my career plan was getting to Formula One, and that's all I wanted to do. And I jumped about it for years and years, and I followed it religiously. And then, I spent the placement year, or just over a placement year, it was 13 months or so, working with Mercedes-AMG Petronas in the aero department. And honestly, amazing, like life-changing experience, and you learn such a huge amount, albeit quite in a weird environment for an engineer to grow up in, where money is no object. All that matters is time. So you walk out and you go back into the real world, and suddenly lead times are a thing and budgets are a thing, and you're like, oh, this is a bit of a shame. But anyway, so I learned a huge amount there. But I guess one of the critical things for my career path was I learned I probably actually didn't want to be in Formula One. I loved the tech side, but I also wanted to bounce it with my own sporting career. And at the time, back in 2012, 2013, I was starting to push more. I mean, I was a triathlete at the time, but moved into cycling and got better and better. And I wanted to focus on that, and was very lucky at the time to meet Simon Smart, who a lot of people probably know through Envy and Scott Bikes and Enduro Clothing. And he, I guess, took me under his wing a bit. I worked for him for 6 months after graduating, and just a really interesting guy to push me in the direction of cycle sport aerodynamics. And went back to uni, finished up bachelor's and masters, and just thought I want to get involved in cycling and try and make people go faster. And I think it's been an exciting few years since graduation, really.
So what kind of things do you do with like the Danish team? They've broken the world record so many times now. How can that happen? Because every Olympics, everyone's like, oh, this must be the furthest you can go. And then like they came and they just destroyed everyone in Berlin.
So I'd been involved, that was in February, since late October officially. I'd done a little bit beforehand. But yeah, we'd kind of agreed that in fact, the official start point was the moment at which Huub Wattbike couldn't really race against Denmark at a World Cup anymore, which was Glasgow World Cup in the rounds, where they beat us and they rode a 48.2 or 48.4, which is pretty outrageous in Glasgow. Anyway, so the job itself is kind of split between 3 and a bit engineers, myself, Martin Toft Madsen, who's obviously a pretty renowned time trialist and all-round nerd, and then Casper van Volsack, who used to be a rider and is just a great, knowledgeable guy who's very inquisitive, but also good organisationally, which is great for me and Martin because we're kind of blue sky thinkers and need someone to pull you back down to earth quite often. And then a really good mechanic in Mads, who just, loves trying crazy stuff. And I think we're very lucky in the environment we have, where we have basically full autonomy to do as we please within the budget to make them go fast. And the riders are just outrageous. Nothing short of that. Obviously, I've raced against them, and I know the numbers that we do as a team. And now sitting on the other side of the fence and seeing the numbers that they do, in short, they are world class. And we were probably masquerading as world class riders wrapped up in a load of aerodynamics. So you can kind of see why they achieve great results. And I think Berlin, they just executed incredibly well. We're in great form, in good positions and stuff. I mean, everyone looks at them now and says, yeah, you didn't bring your A kit out. Well, clearly didn't need to. They just rocked up and dominated. Pretty impressive, to be honest, to just watch.
Do you think the track as well has something to do with it?
Yeah. So Berlin, anyway, was fairly renowned as a quick track. And then combination of low air density, quite high temperature as well. So your rolling resistance was pretty low. And then obviously running into the Olympics, good form. There's a lot of contributing factors that meant that was going to be a really quick world champs. And I think it scared a lot of people just how fast it actually was. I mean, myself included, because at the time, Corona wasn't a thing. And we were heading up to altitude 2 months later to have a go at the team pursuit world record, which was a 48.0 at the time. I'm thinking 48.0 is doable. We can do that. We can probably do a 45, 46 if all goes well. And then suddenly you're like, 44. I've made my life really hard.
So you're not just a kind of aerodynamics expert. You've also achieved a notable number of results in the UK. In 2017, you basically were the time trial champion from the kilo up to the 50-mile record. Kind of, how did you balance that going from such short distances and up to 50 miles?
Honestly, I wish I knew, because I'd bottle it up and do it again and again, because it was just one of those seasons where everything seems to go right. And I was probably in a lucky situation with business where it was growing, but at a controllable level. So I had a sensible income that I could basically do what I wanted to do on the equipment side, and was knowledgeable enough to obviously get fairly aero and get a jump on everyone else domestically anyway on the aerodynamics front. So I was training well, able to buy good equipment, and could go and execute it all in pretty big races. But that sweet spot's hard to come by, especially when you swing to the other end, and now you have more work to do and you need to train harder, and the aerodynamic gains are even harder to come by. So I guess that was the perfect storm in a way. But it's just, I don't quite know how I went at both ends of the extreme. I know, speaking about with my housemates Johnny and Tipper, and they always take the piss like, Dan, you don't train, how the hell do you ever get the results? And I think it was coming back to just that perfect sweet spot of, I was in a good physiological state, I was really motivated, and everything really aligned for 1 year only.
So from someone who's a pretty rubbish time trialer, how would you improve your, let's say, 10 miles? That seems more achievable in people's, do you focus more on the equipment or more on the training?
Myself personally, I work on the energy outside. So yeah, equipment, execution, position, that kind of thing. As much as I understand a fair bit of physiology, I do not profess to understand it on a level that I could ever be a good quality coach, I don't think. Or at least I'm not to the level where you're like your Stephen Silers of the world, or even like your Jacob Tippers, who do have a good understanding. They've done the study, they've got their degrees, and then they've applied it for many years. And I think that's where you learn a huge amount. So I always try to focus more on the equipment side, and I guess a good handling on maths and physics, and to a certain extent now even chemistry when you're looking at like drivetrain efficiency, which is quite an interesting one. So yeah, it's always that side of the equation that I focus on. And I guess bringing in Joe Publics like yourself, if you come in, there's a huge amount you can gain in position. There's a huge amount you can gain in equipment. It just comes down to the time, the effort, and the money you've got to throw at the problem, really. And you can go a long way off very little watts. And I think that's been proven in years gone by. There were a few guys who were ahead of the curve on aerodynamics. And when you look at it now, the powers weren't outrageous, but they were just going incredibly quick because they could get the right kit and get it dialed in, and yeah, wipe the floor with everybody else domestically.
Is the national title something that you have in mind?
Oh yeah, definitely this year. I've had a good few national TTs, but never really the perfect one. And even right now, we don't even know where it's going to be, when it's going to be. But I'm definitely preparing for that because yeah, the track stuff is no more, or at least as it currently stands. We're definitely not team pursuing, that's for sure, at that kind of level. And I want to have a go at that. I've had a go at an hour back in February, and that went really well at sea level. Keen to have another go at an hour over in Denmark in a month or so's time. And then, yeah, hopefully off the back of all that, some good time trials on the road and chrono designations and all that kind of stuff, and hopefully some selection for some big races.
Because in 2019, you actually finished 5th in nationals. How was that nationals for you?
Good, but not great. It was. I've always struggled, actually. It sounds odd, to taper very well, in that I probably overly taper down because that's what everyone else in my household's doing. And if I compare what I do to what they do, I'm doing a significant amount less, and probably should just train on through. And I didn't perform as well as I probably felt I could have done, but I mean, I still got 5th and was something like 15 seconds off the podium. And yeah, you're taking on World Tour guys. It was like Owen Doull and Dowsett and Cummings and all that. So they're not bad time trialists by any stretch of the imagination. But if you want to win, then you've just got to find a way to get that performance out. And I think this year I can definitely focus on that a bit more and be a bit more selfish going into those races and try a few different things, and hopefully it all comes together and can do something pretty cool.
So last year was also the World Championships was in Yorkshire, and you were actually part of one of the events together with Harry Tanfield and John Archibald, I think.
Yep, in the mixed relay. And my girlfriend, who was in the female team as well.
What do you think of that event, and how was it just for you guys being on the podium?
I loved it. Yeah, it was obviously great memories, like thinking back at how many times you get to race a home world championships, let alone a surprise podium. The year before, I'd been over in Innsbruck in Austria working with the Canyon SRAM team for the women's team time trial. That was obviously the last one as a trade team. So they took us shock win, and that was absolutely epic. I got to go up on the podium holding the trophy, and the amount of stick I've got, I'm like, Dan, what the hell are you doing? Why are you on the podium? But that was one of my proudest moments, just as a consultant rather than as a rider. And then it gives you that drive to want to do it yourself. And when the opportunity presented itself, sort of late June, early July, they were saying, look, we're looking for riders who are keen to do the team's time trial. We don't know exactly who would suit it because there's no prior experience of it, and they weren't going to do the European champs either, so it was just a straight in and go for it. And I think myself, John and Harry fitted the bill perfectly. We knew each other incredibly well. We'd lived together. Myself and John at the time were still living together. We trained in team pursuit for years and years and knew each other inside out. And I think there's a lot to be said for gelling as a team, being honest and candid and saying, you're doing crap, sort this out, or just riding well and being comfortable and knowing what the strengths and weaknesses of each person is. So I think that was just perfect. And we had a great ride. I think we were the second quickest men's team. It was only the Dutch who had us. I think considering where we'd come from to that, I was pretty happy with it. And to get onto the podium was just amazing. Family and friends and all that kind of stuff. And obviously live on TV, it was just, if we didn't win, but it felt like we'd won.
You also did the Tour de Yorkshire that year. How did it just feel? Well, you had better weather there a bit.
It's just classic Yorkshire. You bring a main event there and it's like, okay, lovely sun, race starts, chuck it down. So even the Team Time Trial, we'd ridden it countless times and never once had it rained on us. And then, race day came round and heavens opened. But I think that probably played to our favour, having looked at some of the other teams going around. But yeah, the Tour de Yorkshire, it actually, so stage one went really well. And to be honest, from a stage racing perspective, that's probably all I can ever hope for. I'm kind of like, I guess, Chris Boardman equivalent. You've got one good ride in you, and then after that, it's kind of hang on for a bit. So I got in the break and, just literally caught on the line in the last 20 metres or so, which is a bit of heartbreak, but put everything into it. And I guess you roll the dice, you want to win. You don't want to just ride it in for third place or something. So that was cool. And then stage two, you're in a jersey, and we were literally riding around the Harrogate course, and the camera bike started following me, and I was not having a great time. It's not obviously a very flat course around Harrogate. And they said, the worlds are going to be here. And then I looked behind thinking, there's probably another 50 riders. I can keep sliding back. And I'm literally in the convoy. And I was like, Jesus, when did that happen? best move up. And I was just swearing at myself, like, there's no way in hell I'm applying to ever ride around this world's course. It looks absolutely horrific. And then, 2 months later, I'm in.
Yeah, speaking of John and also, Charlie Tanfield, Team KGF, you were kind of one of the founders of it. How did that all come about? Because that was on the back of your very successful time trial year.
Yeah. How did it come about? It was late 2016. The documentary doesn't quite go that far back. So if you go on our Huub Wattbike website, we had a documentary of our first season as Team KGF, and I guess it's quite an interesting watch. I mean, I love watching it, but everyone loves watching themselves back. It was it was basically myself and Charlie just having a go at the IP at Nationals, nothing more than that. We'd ridden on the road that year together, which was with Planet X Northside. Had a good year on the road. Charlie actually used to be on the programme as a youth, I think it was, for a couple of years, and he got booted. Even when he was national IP champion, he was national champion a few things. But the Tanfields, as you may or may not know, I think most people realise, are a bit of a liability at the best of times. When you get them dialed, they're amazing. When you just have to babysit them. I'd be like, everyone's seen that video of Charlie Tanfield missing the start of the World Champs a couple of years back. That is not a rare occurrence. We had similar thing in Minsk where Harry was trying to convince some of the nation to Facebook live stream the final, and I was in the gate and the countdown time was going. It was like 25 seconds. He's not even on the track yet. Just like, Harry, what are you doing? So anyway, rewind, late 2016, myself and Charlie back in Derby, riding around, training for the IP, and we thought, we're halfway there to a team pursuit team. I'm sure we can grab 2 more guys in and we'll probably go pretty well. So I convinced Johnny Whale, who was at Loughborough Uni at the time, just finishing his psychology degree off. I knew he was a good rider. He'd gone to British Uni Champs and done some pretty outrageous stuff, and just generally a good athlete and a good guy to have, good personality. I mean, he calls himself the chief morale officer of the team, which isn't far wrong. And then, the fourth one was Tipper, who took some work to convince. He was over in, I think it was somewhere in China, doing one of the late season UCI stage races. Asked him, was like, don't worry, mate, you don't have to finish. Just do a long turn, eject, it'll be totally fine. I mean, I'd sold Johnny on the same premise, but and he said no, which is a bit of I thought that was going to be an easy sell. Anyway, came back and hounded. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, he changed his mind, decided he was in, got to the track, and then told him, mate, you've got to get round, which is when a lot of our slightly left field strategies around longer turns and dropping in at man 3 and that kind of stuff really evolved from. It wasn't so much innovation for the sake of innovation. It was necessity of trying to get Tipper across the line, who, I mean, would admit himself that he's not a world-class pursuiter, but he was damn well trying. And myself and Charlie were mixing it up, doing 3-4 lap turns and dropping in at man 3 and all these kind of random moves that meant, I mean, that season in Manchester World Cup, our second World Cup, Tipper did half a lap in the whole race, and that was in the last kilo, and that's how well we protected him for the whole race, and we still got round for 4th and early beat the European champs. So it was, I think that in itself was quite an achievement. I think Tipper's, I don't know, it's a hard one for him, and you look back on some of the footage of the interviews around that time, and I guess being the 4th man is always the hardest thing because the pressure's always on with you. And I know John feels exactly the same. Even this year, he's an outrageous time trialist on the road, but his peak power is always lacking. And he literally is shit scared going into the start that he's going to get dropped and wreck it for the whole team. And that's pressure. But when it all comes together, it's absolutely awesome. And yeah, the team has just gone from strength to strength from that first season in 2017. I mean, Charlie went on and won the World Team Pursuit Championships, and John's gone to Worlds, and we've since obviously signed Harry, and then signed Kyle and Will, and Ashton's joined us, and he's broken every record under the sun. Is going outrageous. So yeah, it's been a nice run, I'd say.
Yeah, how's the setup compared to KGF?
Yeah. KFB, KFC, yeah, everyone makes it. We've heard everyone under the sun, don't worry.
Why is it called that as well?
It's basically the Karen Green Foundation. So when we set up, we needed funds to set the team up to pay for the UCI and obviously to run it. And we managed to get some together, but we didn't have like a title sponsor as such. Karen Green Foundation were keen on helping us out. Karen Green is Ellie Green's mother. She passed away with leukemia back in 2011, 2012, I think it was at the time. It's a local charity basically to raise funds for respite care for families who are struggling with someone in the family who has leukemia or another cancer. And Ellie was keen to help out. I mean, she's gone strength to strength within the industry. She now works for Team Ineos, and she's just a really keen cyclist. And I mean, at the time she was only 17, 18. So she's really young, but just keen to help out and take on, I guess, more of a managerial organizational role. And we're super lucky as well. Her dad owned a bike shop, which meant having access to trade accounts when you literally all left university, piled up with student debt, overdrafts, credit cards. So anyway, the Karen Green Foundation was just to fly that flag, as it were, and to raise sort of their profile and the awareness of that, and hopefully some funds by extension. And Ellie stayed on for another year or so until she went to university. But then the team's grown. We've had sponsors come on board who obviously want title sponsorship, and that's a big one. And as much as you want to remain charitable and true to your roots, at some point you need to bring finances in to run the team. So year one, we did, I think it was 4 internationals and 3 domestic races, and the whole budget for the whole season for everything was £16,000. Which is a bit tight. And then it's grown to year 2 was 60, which was like obviously outrageous. Oh my God, 4 times the budget, you do so much cool stuff. And loads of great sponsors came on board that just opened up a world of potential. And that grew even more towards this year. I mean, a lot of the budget this year was just primarily towards the Bolivian trip to try and break some world records. And that's postponed as it currently stands under the COVID pandemic, has shut us down on that one. But it's just grown strength to strength. And the big one, I think, that is Huub have kind of led the way in the middle. Wattbike and them, they work together a huge amount across social media and that kind of thing, but they just connect the dots for us. So Wattbike is run by Rich Baker, who seems to know everyone in the industry, and Dean's moved about as well and seems to be in the exact same situation. So whenever you need a contact or someone to speak to, or access to a certain type of lab or test bike, whatever it might be, you knock on their door, you drop a WhatsApp to either of them, and then a day or two later, you've got your answer and away you go. I think that's just been so helpful that you can be so reactive and responsive, and no red tape, just find the right person, get the answer, get faster.
So how many people do you kind of have, and do you have staff for your team?
Sort of, I guess not in the traditional sense. So originally, physiologist-wise, we had Mehdi Cordy, who was literally helping off his own back. Now he heads up the Dutch sprint team. So he's there with Hugo Hack, and they're obviously doing pretty outrageously well. They won the world champs in nigh on every sprint event. I think that we won the team sprint by a second, like a 42-second event. It's outrageous winning margin. Anyway, so we had Mehdi. He was awesome, and it was his original idea for the Mehdi method, where I start at 1 and then drop in at 3 to keep Tipper further back in the line. Just one of his kind of left field ideas of why don't you do this. So worked really well. And then Mehdi moved on. He obviously went over to the Netherlands. Steve Faulkner joined us. In fact, actually, rewind, we had a guy called Kurt Bergen-Taylor with us a little bit as well in the first year. He's now working with the Canadian Federation, so he heads up a lot of their sports science stuff. And then Steve joined us. We've had Steve for a couple of years now, so he's based at Nottingham Trent Uni. His background is thermal physiology, but he works in many areas. He's the head of the sports engineering department there, and they give us tons of support, buying power meters and lab access and 3D scans and loads of stuff. He's just, pulls strings everywhere for you, which is what you need. So he's been really helpful. Beyond that, though, staff-wise, we had originally Mark Akers, the mechanic, so he was paid. He's awesome. Beeline Bikes. You probably met Mark as well when you're around Oxford. Just really great mechanic. Got a lot of time for Mark. Unfortunately, Beeline were incredibly busy and we couldn't get him for this season, which is a big frustrating one. But then we picked up a guy called Rich Steels. So he's local to Derby, who runs Detail Bike Tech. And he's just fitted in like a glove. He doesn't have the race experience that Mark had, but he is, well, we describe it as sex best, but it's basically just detail focused. Someone who really, really gets all the fine details of why we're asking something to be done. And I think that's the thing with performance, that all those details do matter. And when you've got a mechanic who is the first one up and the last one home, then you can be pretty trustworthy of them. And yeah, Rich has been great. And then beyond that, we had another guy, Rich Needham, who is, for one of a phrase, team manager, but he just does everything. So you can just offload tasks to him, whether it's, can you send this crank off at the post office? Can you drop these keys in there? He's just runs around like a endless chicken for you. So that's about the extent of our team, I guess, from that perspective. But beyond the mechanics, no one's paid a salary and everyone's there for their own benefit and their own interest. So it's just always trying to give back for what they want. So a lot of the physiologists tend to want access to top level athletes to try new ideas with and gain experience. And I think that's hopefully what we've given to a lot of them as well.
I mean, it's really interesting. But how is, like, track cycling is such a weird world, because you guys were competing against national teams. That's something you certainly don't see in road cycling. How was it, like, you guys even beat the GB national team at the nationals? So how was it for you to kind of rock up and then suddenly you're seeing the Italian national team and, like you said, the Danish national team?
Been really interesting, actually, because as much as we race against them, we're also kind of spectators on the side, because they're all chasing Olympic selection and we're just like rocking the boat, I guess. And the first few World Cups we went to, they were looking at us like, who are these, I guess, choppers just chopping around at world record splits, doing random stuff with their changes and turn strategies and God knows what. But I think at first they kind of were a bit shocked, and then bit by bit people started popping over and asking questions. And the Danish were probably the most inquisitive and always have been, and probably the most friendly and helpful as well. But they were always there, just knocking on, what chain rings are you using, what chain are you using, what wheels that, what tires that, why do you do this with your position, what helmet, all that kind of questioning. They love it, and I think that's part of the reason why they all go so well. They understand it and they're inquisitive and they're keen to learn and improve. But I think some nations didn't see it the same way, and I guess have never seen eye to eye with us. They've always seen us more as competition and don't want to engage with that. And I think we laugh and joke with a lot of nations, but like the Italians, we never really speak to. The British, we obviously have a bit of a frosty relationship with them. I think there's been a lot of tit for tat in the media, and we get slated, oh, they're terrible, they're just aero, or they're just that. And it's like, well, irrespective of what we are, speed wins races and we're beating you. So yeah, what else can you say, really? Yeah, I think Tokyo will be a very eye-opening experience, and it's a bit of a shame it's not happening in a few weeks' time. But 12 more months is, going to be an interesting one. Yeah, it's just been quite an interesting few years, really, and it's a shame to come to an end with the UCI changing the regulations on trade teams. And then last week came around and they'd completely U-turned on it and said trade teams are allowed again, which I'd heard on the grapevine was going to happen. But then, to be honest, it doesn't quite fit in with what I want to do, what everyone else wants to do. So there's a lot of us have different plans within our life. I guess we've done, give or take, an Olympic cycle, not made it to the Olympics, and want to have an interesting go at roads or the hour record or time trials or whatever it might be. But we've been there, done that, got the t-shirt and enjoyed the process. But I can't see myself running a UCI trade team for another 2 years, 3 years, because it's all encompassing. It swallows your life up if you want to do it properly. And I've got a lot of other things I want to do.
Yeah, speaking of what you want to do, what's kind of your goals for this year on the road? Because there will be some kind of races, even though, like, the big events, for which I think is really annoying, speaking to Tim, he was on here, about them cancelling the Tour of Britain, cancelling the Tour de Yorkshire, things like that. What kind of race program have you guys got for Ribble Pro Cycling?
It's one of those unknown ones, because I keep changing plans. But I guess there's kind of a few hurdles to jump through. There's getting an invite to a race, because we're only a continental team now and everyone's going to want to race. So I imagine with a crammed calendar, World Tour and Pro Conti teams are going to take most spots. So then we're going to be fighting for scraps, I guess, on entries. hopefully we do get a few, because I think we're renowned for taking it on. Like the Saudi tour, we got an invite there, and I think we did pretty well out of that. Honestly, I don't quite know. Is the short one. I want to do well in time trials. That's where my heart lies this year. I've spent lockdown preparing for that, and then we'll just see what races do come along. Just kind of play it by ear and be ready to respond. I think with how I win races anyway, it's probably wise to just be a time trialist and train as a time trialist. And if I'm going to win, it's sure as hell not from a sprint.
Would you be tempted to try our record this year?
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully, anyway, we make it to Bolivia before the year's out. The budget's still there. But if the clocks, or if it doesn't sort of align anyway, I'm going to have a go at sea level. I did one back in February in Derby. Literally just day after a good track session, I was like, legs are good, on we go. Hire the track for an hour, ride around and see what happens. And went all right. I did 52.6, which was pretty solid, all things considered. I mean, Derby's not a rapid track by any stretch of the imagination, and conditions were sort of fairly typical. So a bit better prep, got some new go faster parts, which always helps. Then I think well into the 53s, it'd be nice to crack 54 on a quick track, and just see how fast you can go. Really, it's one of those nice challenges that you're just racing against the clock and or against the distance, and just be as good as you can and see if the stars align on the right day and you can do something pretty outrageous. Then it could go down the record books.
So a lot of people who aren't hour records, nerds or geeks or whatever you want to call it, I like the hour record, but won't really understand why you have to go to Bolivia to do it. What's the difference between that and doing it in Derby, for example?
I mean, a bit of a rewind. As a team, because of the UCI regulation changes, the plan was to head up to altitude to have a go at the team pursuit, the individual pursuit, and then I guess the final kicker, have a go for the hour as well. The advantage when you go up to altitude is pretty much purely air density. So as you go higher and higher, the barometric pressure drops off, and about 2,500 meters above sea level, you're seeing about 20-25% reduction in air density, which means you're seeing 20-25% reduction in aerodynamic drag, which is obviously the predominant drag factor in cycling. So at 55k an hour, you can see pretty huge reductions, like talking 100 plus watts. However, there's the other side of the equation that you can't put as much power out, the energy inside. So because barometric pressure's dropped off, partial pressure of oxygen means you can't get as much oxygen saturated into your blood, so your aerobic power drops off. So give or take 10-12%, but you're 20-25% off and you lose 10 or 12, you're still quids in. So it's just, in short, faster to go up to altitude. And there's kind of a sweet spot, which for hours is probably in the region of 2,000 to 2,500. The faster you go, the higher the sweet spot. So like a team pursuit, the optimal is probably more like high 3,000s, maybe even low 4,000 meters. There's no fast velodromes up there, at least not yet. We were super lucky with Ashton. He'd raced over in Cochabamba in Bolivia and in Aguascalientes in Mexico. So we have plenty of data for both and could weigh up our options, as it were.
Yeah, we'll definitely look out for that. Thank you very much for this interview, Dan. It's been very interesting. And I wish you best of luck with 2020.
Cool. Thanks for having me. And speak soon.
That's it for this lockdown interview with Dan Bigham. I've included the link to his Wattshop down below and the documentary he mentioned as well. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe to not miss out on any upcoming videos. And why not check out the interview with another founding member of Team KGF, Charlie Tanfield, or Dan's World Relay teammate, Harry Tanfield. Thank you for watching and see you next time.